welcome to X Generation Silent Stages. This is episode number 4. We have two special guests today, both here in Austin, Texas. We'll start with Patsy from SIMS. We'll let her introduce herself and talk about what she does for the organization.
Cool. Hi, everybody. I am Patsy Dolan Bouressa with the SIMS Foundation. SIMS Foundation is the only nonprofit in the nation that provides behavioral health care to musicians, music industry professionals, and their dependent family members, which sounds like a lot, and it is. But we do a lot more than that, in fact. We do a lot of training. We're advocates at a state and federal level with regards to how behavioral health care is delivered in this country, which is kind of a mess if you've ever been in it. We also do a lot of training in our communities where we're located to help any community member learn more about how to deal with an emotional issue, how to get help if they need it, how to communicate with one another around those issues, as well as the topic of what substance use recovery can look like. So we kind of do a whole lot in that behavioral health care realm, and just like to be a community partner on top of helping those in the music industry. So that's SIMS.
Amazing. Awesome. And I guess let me jump in real quick before we get to Jeff. I guess I should explain the reason that we're having this conversation is obviously what you do is very important, especially to the music community, not only in Austin, but across the world, as it's an ongoing, I don't want to say crisis, but it is something that I feel like is constantly needs to be addressed. And obviously the pandemic has kind of compounded on this issue of mental health and possible substance abuse, just because people are being secluded, they're not having the usual interaction, and so whatnot. So this is the reason that we are talking to the two of you to kind of get better perspective on what's been going on for the past 13 months in both the realm of what you do, and then kind of get Jeff's perspective, as he mentioned earlier that he's been kind of secluded, which obviously leads to, is part of the reason that's leading probably some issues that you are dealing with, for the past few months or so in the community. So, Mr. Jeff.
I'm Jeff Klein. Singer, songwriter, musician. Have a band called My Jerusalem. I've been in a bunch of other bands like Twilight Singers and Gutter Twins and a bunch of other things. Produce stuff. Grifter. Do a lot of
maker.
Things. Pizza maker. A lot of different things these days that have expanded during quarantine. And yeah, I've been in Austin on and off since 1999 at this point. So cool. Yeah.
Cool. I guess to start off, one of the questions that we ask is, at what point, or was there a defining moment when all of this started happening that you realized that this was going to affect you as an artist or as an individual, or Patsy, as a person who handles the things that you do with your organization? A lot of people reference South by Southwest shutting down as being like the key moment, and I think that kind of resonates with a lot of us, especially in Austin. I didn't know, maybe you guys have something else, or what you were going through and what you started to think about at that moment. It's like, oh, what am I going to do now? Or my workload is going to increase this much, or like, what am I going to do to adjust? Am I going to move all my stuff into my house? I don't know. So Patsy, if you want to go ahead and start.
I mean, as trite as it is, it was definitely for us South by. The weeks leading up to South by, as you were hearing about this virus, and mostly from Europe and China, in the office, we only have 6 employees. That was the topic for the week leading up to the announcement that South by was canceled. I kept telling everybody, this sounds bad. I think they're going to have to cancel South by. And 100% of the people in the office were like, they're never going to cancel South by. That will never happen. And then we were all in the office when they announced it, and it felt like the air got sucked out of our office, literally, because that's when it was like, oh no, this is serious. I don't think, at least for me personally, I haven't really asked the rest of the staff, I guess. I think it took several weeks for the impact, or for me to start letting my brain go to what this is going to do to people as just humans and dealing with this. I would say it was a good month in when you could tell this was not going to be a short-term situation. is when it just sort of was like lower to boom on me, where I thought, oh gosh, there's going to be a breaking point at some point where everyone's just not going to be doing okay. And we really hit that probably around in June, late June. Our phones just started blowing up with people who had never really struggled emotionally, other than, life's ups and downs. But the music industry being just sort of decimated by this thing, it sort of sunk in with the Austin music community, and people just started crumbling. And we've just continued to see that ever since, to a worsening and worsening and worsening degree. So it was kind of a slow unfolding in my brain for what the impact was going to be, but definitely South by is when we all knew this was not going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you, which I know, Michael, you do, but I feel like if you follow me on social media, I have a very my way of dealing with everything is sort of with snarky humor, right? And so when the South by thing first started happening, I made a bunch of jokes online, and then as you saw it kind of go along, and you're like, oh wow, like now they're calling this a national disaster so that like the insurance can take care of things, and so that you saw all these things happening, and then all of a sudden it shifted from South by trying to get ahead of a problem to being actually like the first good decision and actually being preventative. So it turned from it seeming like a selfish thing to all of a sudden being like, no, this is actually, watching it go from local to like national crisis within a few weeks. Definitely South by is like the starter pistol of everything.
Jeff, did you have anything planned for South by, or was it just?
No, I've been, for the last year, well, now I say last year, so for probably the last year and a half, I have this project I've been working on, and all of April I was supposed to be in the studio in Fort Worth working on it. And so, personally for me, the biggest, so this was like one of the first years I wasn't doing South by in however many years. But the biggest thing for me was like coming closer to that April mark and realizing that this isn't happening. Like you can't actually, I can't go to Fort Worth and be in a room with other people and work on stuff. So that was sort of like the beginning of things sort of deteriorating in my musical world due to all this.
So Patsy, what are the numbers showing us about like the mental health issues for musicians, industry professionals during the pandemic? Has it how much has it ticked up?
I don't have a percentage in my brain, and there's all sorts of like layers of what we do at SIMS that impact that number, but I'll give you this as an example. We assisted over 1,400 people in 2020, and we only have 6 employees. So that's a massive number of people to be taken care of. The interesting thing is, that a lot of people assume that because we also provide substance use treatment and supports, that's, this kind of mystique of being in the music industry, right? Is that everybody's got a drug problem. And that's always been a very small percentage of the issues that are coming to us. That completely stopped during the pandemic. No one was seeking any help, which is we're now feeling the brunt of, because now that things are slowly starting to open back up and people are getting vaccinated, what we thought anecdotally was happening. People with a substance use problem were locked down using. There was no sense going to get treatment because I can't do anything. I'm locked down using. And now we're getting a lot of people kind of coming out of their homes now and saying, okay, now I need help, which was our fear, because that's a lot to come at you at once to try to find places to take care of folks when they're coming in large numbers. But I think the bigger issue for us was, we've always had people who will call us in crisis throughout our history. But throughout the last year, people were calling us in a much worse state than they've ever called us before. We've seen relationships that have been solid that we've known for years, whether it's bands, marriage relationships, what have you, that are gone. They've completely been obliterated by this. Too much togetherness, no skills to deal with it. So I think the aftermath of this is going to be pretty difficult for a lot of people. Like their whole world has changed. They've lost their bandmate, they've lost their producer, they're no longer married, their children aren't speaking to them. And it's like, how do we move forward and deal with this new situation that we're going to have to be facing? I just think it's that unknown. We know that it's going to be different and it's going to be difficult, but what will that look like? So I think it's larger numbers, higher acuity of issues that as we've gone along on this pandemic, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And it seems like it's a bit of a catch-22 because like substance abuse treatment is often a group. It's a group home. It's bringing people around you. And here we are in this situation where you have to isolate.
Yeah, it's really I think we only put maybe 2 people into an actual treatment facility for substance use throughout this entire time. And it's unfortunate because that's not the way we work. So normally when somebody's in a facility, we're actually going to meet with that person and their treatment team as they're getting treatment. We can't do that. And so there was this big disconnect with what's happening with our client. Like, we need to know what's happening with our client. And then the poor treatment facility is trying to navigate how to deal with this. You know, anybody in their facility couldn't have visitors. You can't have family counseling when somebody's in there, which is integral and totally a part of this. None of that could happen. So in a way, it's probably a good thing that people chose not to try to access treatment during that time, because it was not perhaps as effective as it could have been as it would have been in person. So yeah, it's a very strange world, even from the mental health side. You've got intensive outpatient programs and such where you would go to group 3 times a week, and you can't do that now. It's all online. Or the complaints we were hearing throughout the summer of people whose chosen path for recovery from substances was like a 12-step program. Well, they're not going to a meeting anymore. It's doing this. And across the board, people were like, that's not why I'm in the 12-step group. Like, this is not helping me. So people were struggling in ways that I don't think anybody could have anticipated. We need each other. That's what it comes down to. Even if you're a hermit, you need at least one person that you're communicating with and connecting to, right? And that just all got stolen from us. Like, it was just gone. So how do you adjust to that?
I think being being an artist or being a musician, it's such I mean, I think anyone that says there isn't sort of some sense of narcissism involved would be lying. And a lot of what you do is you feed off of people relating to what you do, you know, getting the smoke blown up here, like having people like, you know, getting that energy from people because they appreciate what you're doing. And when that's taken away and you don't have an audience, and you're someone like me that has spent 20 years on, you know, getting immediate feedback from people and sort of, you know, that's its own addiction, right? Is acceptance and praise, you know, and then it just being completely suffocated and cut off. I think a lot of people just spiraled out, like not, you know, and you could see the desperation in social media and things like that of everyone trying to figure out, well, how do I get a fix of you know, the serotonin boost from people like telling me I'm great. You know?
It's so interesting, Jeff, because when I was watching the initial, you know, when people started trying to figure out how to do their own live stream from their living room kind of thing, and I'd be watching somebody that I liked, how many times I heard in the early days of people going, well, I can't see the comments. Why can't I see the comments? And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. And I knew what that was. I'm like, I need comments. So yeah.
I mean, for me, honestly, that's been a good thing because it's brought it back to like making art for making art's sake, and maybe gives it something. I think that maybe sometimes that's the thing that gets blurred, and as a artist's career goes along, why everyone's like, oh, well, the early stuff is like the, you know, the true stuff, and then because you're making it because you need to. And then as your career goes along, you're making it because you have to, which are slightly different, but similar concepts. But, you know, I think that this has definitely put it in more of a perspective of like, I actually need this to mentally survive now, and not so much doing it so that I can pat myself on the back for people thinking I'm great.
Yeah, that was kind of going to be my next question, because your material, your art kind of, and hopefully I'm not making any assumptions about this, comes from a pretty dark place. And I think, you know, I mean, which is, you know, I feel a lot of some of the best art does. And I think that's just the process of the artist, like dealing with those issues. And that's one way of maybe therapy. Yeah. So do you find that you have to, are you being more creative now that you've been locked down, and in order to like work through this stuff, or?
It's been in waves. I call it the bipolar coaster. It's sort of like there are moments of like insane productivity followed by just creatively dormant. Especially early on. It's one of those things where one cool thing that I've done is I was hired to do this project with the Boston Ballet right before this all happened. And luckily that's been continuing on actually during this, and it's writing music that doesn't require me to write lyrics, which during a pandemic is fantastic. Because
Yeah.
right now, right now we're having the shared experience. There's nothing really unique going on in my world. It's coming out of this, we're going to hear everybody's pandemic bedroom records, right? That like were recorded on GarageBand, but mixed for $25,000 by Chris Lord or whoever, and that doesn't interest me as much. But I have the things that I've loved that I've done have been great, but they've been things that have got me out of the box and out of my habits and just trying new things. And that's been, which comes to the pizza thing too, which you're joking about. But I mean, like, it's like just like I've challenged myself more in the last year than I have in the last 20 years, because I've gotten really comfortable as an artist and my routine, and I have this thing I do in this way I write, and this fan base that I have that likes the thing that I do. So you get, it gets complacent, but so I've definitely been more creative.
So you like writing songs with no lyrics because you've written all of the songs about your pillow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've written actually. So I mean, I think some of what I've done in the last 12 months is like some of the best stuff I've done, and I do have songs with lyrics, but it hasn't been. But the stuff that's actually more outside the box, where I can pretend I'm John Cage for like a week, you know what I mean? And I'm just recording, pounding on stuff, or or just doing a piano piece, and not just sort of feeling like I have to fit into this, songwriter mold that I've been into forever. Because it's hard. It's hard to write during all this, especially, all the political stuff that was going on, and the first 3/4 of all of this, it's, what do I write about? Let me look at like the last thing I want to do is talk about this,
Yeah. It's interesting because, certainly it's not across the board. That experience, Jeff, that you described about being in some ways more creative and differently creative than you used to be. But we are hearing that a lot. And I think it's from a therapist perspective, it's always nice to see just how naturally resilient we are as an animal. Like, no, if you had given everybody in the world a note that said on this day, the world's going to shut down, everyone would have panicked because nobody would have known, like you would have had time to think about it. And instead it just happened. And then we had sort of that downtime while we were trying to figure out, is this real? How long is this going to last? What's happening? And then it was like, okay, now we're in it. And so many creatives were like, okay, so I used to write music with this guy, but he doesn't want to write anymore. So I'm either going to write by myself, or I'm going to start making candles, or I'm going to start painting. And it's been interesting to see how many people were like, oh my God, I started an entire business completely separate from music. And it was this thing that used to be something that I loved. And now I had the time to actually do it. So it's been, that piece is like one little like silver lining for me as a therapist, just to watch the resilience of us as humans, that we can just adapt and make something pretty out of it, even though we're all like at night going, God, this sucks, and I just want it to be over. But it's kind of cool that everybody had, well, not everybody, but great many have found this little niche and have moved on in a different way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also, I think when you consider your life choices, and as you get older and you're faced with decisions, you're sort of like, that like, maybe if I do A or B, it will affect, my happiness and the way my life is. But now during a pandemic, you're like, actually my decisions directly, immediately affect my life. Right now, you know what I mean? Like, I could actually die, if I do this, or if I don't do this, or I have, whereas before it was more of just this whimsical idea that, probably this would be good for me, this would be bad for me. And then we were kind of faced with a very drastic situation. And so I think that people are sort of like, people did get into fight or flight mode. And when you realize you have to, and then coming from the pandemic into the ice thing with the power outage and the, what I mean? It's like, First, let me
was
not get coughed on to
What's
death.
next?
Now let me not get hypothermia in my house. Now, you know what I mean? It's like, which plague comes next, you know? And
Yeah, and that was an interesting Austin's or Texas specific event, right? Which from our perspective really ratcheted up people's just absolute disintegration of ability to manage anymore. Like
Yeah.
everybody, and again, we're all experiencing this exact same sort of catastrophic event. But as it was happening, I just remember like people texting me going, what the fuck? How is this still like, we can't take this on top of everything else. And but again, then you started seeing people posting on Facebook all these amazing ways that they were staying warm. I was like, I didn't even know you could do that. How are you figuring that out? So again, I think from a therapist perspective, sometimes I can distance myself from like the misery of it and be like, look
Yeah.
at all these amazing people who are doing whatever. Like who taught you how to do that? That's just badass. So it was miserable experience, but kind of cool to watch how creative people got. And then in Austin specifically, and it was the music industry folks, the second people got power back, so many of the folks that I know in the industry, their very first thing was to start doing food drives and organizing volunteers. And it was like, you barely got power after 6 days. And the very first thing you did was try to get the city and take care of each other. And I think that that's what's probably the most beautiful thing about working with this population. It's just beautiful people who care about each other.
Yeah, and for me, selfishly, again, it goes back to that whole like sort of being addicted to like getting feedback from others and sort of interact, you know, like during all this, like I was volunteering at the vaccine hub in San Antonio, you know, for multiple reasons, you know, partly it was one of the most rewarding experiences that I had. And also it's because you're getting kind of that same sort of like interaction with people and appreciation and just feeling like you're giving to the world and people are benefiting from it. So, you know, which is good on a selfish level as well as just on a volunteer and humanitarian level, you know.
Yeah, I feel like I was really impressed with the way the music community kind of came together and started getting out there. And there's a woman, Jeanette Greger, who just seems like she's out there fighting for every musician and every venue employee that she possibly can. And she's fierce and ferocious and intelligent, you know, and not just her, but, you know, she's a fine example, I think. But it was very impressive, you know, but, you know, I feel like they were doing a lot more than some of our politicians were doing to, you know, to help out the community,
and
which
actually,
isn't saying much, but.
Actually, Jeanette, just before the winter debacle, whatever we're calling it, she had submitted a proposition to the city of Austin to let all of the music industry people actually coordinate the vaccinations in Austin, because they could have done it like that. It would have been done. We would have all been vaccinated. And then the snow thing happened. And she was one of the ones, right, that didn't have power from Sunday night until Friday. And then Friday, her lights came back on and she organized all of that with a bunch of people. But that's one who I was thinking of. And this is what I'm talking about, though, this resilience and this desire to support one another. Because the thing I don't think people know about this industry is these are people who don't get paid anything. Yeah. Like the vast majority of the folks in this industry don't get paid anything. They have to work 2, 3, 4 jobs at venues, at restaurants, just to support themselves and their families. And so they really rally around each other, because as soon as one person falls, the rest of them know that it's just, you know, just by the grace of God, that could have been them. Like they're all just 1 second from not having a home or not being able to support their family. And so that's what I think engenders that fierce sense of community, is everyone in that industry knows how hard it is. It's just the rest of us on the outside who see, you know, the mega touring bands and think, oh, well, everybody who's on stage at whatever venue are making millions. And that's obviously not the case.
So Jeff, we talked about the pizza story. Can you tell the story there?
Yeah, you know, it actually I mean, a lot of times over the years, I've always cooked a lot, baked a lot, it's sort of been my other vice when I'm not playing music. And so the last few years I've been obsessed with making pizza and doing my own dough, and I've worked for years on like a dough recipe, and being a native New Yorker, it's, you know, and not having, you know, great pizza in Austin. There's okay pizza in Austin, and, you know, that's a whole other podcast. You know, but you know, the first thing kind of came up as I also like do really lazy but entertaining graphic design sometimes, and so I made this sort of logo, like pizza box logo, that was like this pandemic pizza, and it was basically like a coronavirus that looks like a pepperoni pizza, and this whole thing. And then I thought it was funny, and then the next, and I sent it to a couple of friends that thought it was hilarious. And then the way that the internet works now is you send something to a couple of friends, and the next day my sponsored ads were all your own custom pizza box. And so I was like, fuck it, I'll get some pizza boxes made because it's funny. Like a 50 box minimum shows up at my house, and I was like, I guess I'll fill them with pizza and give them out to friends. And then it just sort of took off, and that I started doing these pop-ups, and they would like sell out in like a minute, and I'd done a couple, you know, and now it's not anything that I'm really going to pursue further than it just being entertaining and fun for me and friends. And so, and honestly, like I've gone a year without buying a friend a drink or dinner or anything. So this was my deal. I was like, I could connect with friends, and again, here's that little oxytocin kick of me providing something, and someone thinks I'm great. Look, I'm addicted to being great at stuff. I'm okay with that. I don't think that's the worst thing. I've had much worse habits in my entire life than this. So that's one I'll stick to, you know, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it. Yeah, so it's been a thing where like every other weekend I'll do like, you know, 10 to 20 pizzas, and they'll go in like 2 seconds. And awesome. Yeah, it's everyone keeps joking around that they keep saying like half like the Austin music community in the feed is like my pizza throughout it through the week.
I love that.
Kind of funny.
So cool.
So Patsy, you were talking about how you feel like that a lot of the issues are starting to come to surface now that you know, people are starting to get out, and you know, they're not secluded as much anymore, and I guess the reality of some of their issues might be kind of hitting them. But I guess I'm curious of Jeff, from an artist perspective, seeing the way things are starting to open up, and you see like touring bands starting to book shows. How do you feel about it? Do you feel like it's about time? Do you feel like it's kind of happening out of, you know, we need to do this to give some hope? You know,
I mean, there's no right way to do it, right? I mean, like
yeah.
At some point we have to start doing it, right? It's the whole idea of getting back on the horse. Yeah. Do I think that I think we're going to have some forward movement and backward movement, depending on how things like variants and just respectful communities and venues. And I think it's also hard because as a musician, which I've seen with stuff, is it's also going to be kind of Lord of the Flies when this all opens up, because everyone's like, and now let's work. And all these venues, half of them being different promoters and things, you're going to deal with, you're the 25th hold at X venue, and they're waiting for, and you're seeing guarantees are half of what they were, or you're going to be dealing with door deals when you haven't dealt with them in years because promoters don't want to take a risk. There's so many things involved. I think on a local level, you can start doing things, maybe outdoor stuff.
Yeah.
I'm still hesitant on the indoor thing until there's really like solid data. And I wouldn't want to be the artist that kind of, you know, moved that along in the wrong direction.
Yeah. You don't want to be that artist that, you know, gets out there on the road and starts playing the big shows, and all of a sudden their audience is coming down with, you know, they become a super spreader.
Where it's like Jeff Klein had another super spreader event in Michigan.
Yeah, and you know, it's hard too because it's a pandemic. Everyone's broke. You know, do you want to actually hold on to people's ticket money, you know, and not let them just sort of part with? I don't know. It's really, really hard to say. I don't think there's a right answer, you know.
I bought tickets to Dinosaur Jr. at ACL Live Moody, and they have like an extra like COVID insurance that you can buy, I guess, in case
That you can buy.
things
Yeah.
things don't get better, then you can
Yeah.
you buy that and they'll guarantee that you get your money back or something like that. So
I assume we're going to see more of that, which is
You're
kind
gonna
of,
have to, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you? That doesn't, I mean, we were just talking the other day because, ACL announced that they were apparently going to do this
Yeah.
live this year, but we were just discussing, how do you have ACL festival for 2 weekends when Europe is getting locked back down? So how are you going to get any of those bands over here? You're not. And so it's like, I don't know how those festival people will ever know the right answer, the right time to pull the trigger and be like, we're trying to do this.
Yeah.
For
And
all
you
the
can't-
reasons you just said.
and you can't do it at reduced capacity. You just can't
Yeah.
afford to do it. And
Absolutely not.
there's going to be so much risk.
There's too many variables. It's kind of like when this whole thing started, and no matter where you lived in the country, wherever you were, you didn't like the way where you were was handling it, right? They locked
Yeah.
it down too late. They opened it up too early. But when you start to peel it back and look, how in the world do you make those decisions with all of those variables? I just don't know how you do it. I don't know how you decide this is the right way to handle this, because it's just somehow everybody's going to be at risk one way or another. It's just, about degrees.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the person making those decisions.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay being like the sacrificial lamb on something that's like important or might affect change or might help people. Me playing a Tuesday night at Antone's or Lambert's is not worth the risk, and I think is just selfish, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, and I know that there's a lot of ideas of like, well, I'm a musician and I got to make a living, and this is how it's like, yeah, but your one gig every 3 months at a 200 capacity club isn't paying your rent. Not to being an asshole, but I mean, at some point everybody's got to sacrifice for, like, I think for me, and maybe this is just my personal experience, and I really, really needed it because I am admittedly a nightmare of a narcissist, and I've kind of been an enabler to that my entire life, choosing this career and stuff. But like, I want to be a more compassionate person. I want to be somebody that's kind of got a greater good in mind with my actions and the things that I do. To an extent, middle ground. But I mean, I also still want to have fun and be self-serving. But but like having a nice balance is important. And I think that that's what this 12, 13 months has made me do, is try to seek that balance. And I think within that, like, that being said, somebody's got to go out there first and make the mistakes and fuck up. And honestly, there's gonna have to be, right? There's always got to be a villain, and that villain's either going to be the promoter, the club, the booking agent, the artist. And unfortunately, like, I don't see a world where we start doing this. If something goes wrong, it's got to be someone's fault.
Yeah, that's just human nature. But I think you're right. Some venue, some artist has to be the first so that we can see this is going to work or it's not. And that's kind of where we're at. You're all, I think, at least here in Texas in the United States, because the political side of things, I think here we're going to fall prey to a lot more difficulties, right? Because of the political nature of our state, and people who don't believe this is even a thing, or don't believe in vaccinations and have never worn a mask and don't care about any of that. And so it's like this place versus maybe New York, right? It's going to be different. And how do you make that determination? So it's like somebody in every state and every city is going to have to be the first to try it. And then we just kind of have to see what happens from there and learn from those mistakes as we go. Otherwise, we're just going to stay locked down forever.
Yeah, which isn't good.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
Well, we could all just follow the Flaming Lips. Way of
Everyone in their
doing
own
things.
bubble.
Everybody in a bubble for every
Yeah.
show. We're not going to make any money, but at least you'll be there.
Well, the other thing is like, I love the idea of like these outdoor shows, and I've seen people doing them successfully and stuff. It's depressing to look out at a field and see like 40 picnic benches full of 6 people each at them all. You know what I mean? Like the experiences of live shows for me, again, I'm a caveman. I love feeling the kick drum like in my chest. I love being arm to arm with people I don't know, having the shared experience. When you're at these picnic tables, it's like when you go to a restaurant, there's a band playing, you're not there to see the band, it's background music, and that's what this has turned everything into. It again, beggars can't be choosers, and if that's how this has to start, this has to start that way. But to me, I'm not as interested in providing that experience, because that's the selfish the devil on this shoulder going like, well, if I can't get off on it, I'm not, I want to see if we can get further along before I start doing stuff again.
People at the drive-in shows beeping their horn and instead of like the applause from the crowd. Just not the same, is it?
No, it's like this dystopian future that's like,
Exactly.
Yeah, I
So-
couldn't imagine being at a My Jerusalem show sitting at a picnic table watching.
yeah,
Not the same vibe. I need it
weird,
dirty,
yeah.
smoky, smelling like urine.
Yeah, I don't,
Yeah.
Some things it works better for, there are some shows that would totally work better for, but
Sure.
None that I'm
Yeah.
going
not the ones that I've been to in a long time. Yeah.
to. No.
For the whole thing, there's this sort of like really sad irony where people get so much peace, joy, satisfaction out of what you do, Jeff, music, and who, like, it's almost like when doctors are sick, it's like, who treats the doctor, who treats the person, who's going to
Mhm.
give the person who's giving me joy their joy. It's
Yep.
it's really it's just sort of like this zero-sum game or something where it's like, who can be there for you, because you've been there for us, Michael and I, huge music lovers. So I just find that difficult.
It's so interesting that you say that, Paul. I'm smiling not because I think that's a happy statement, because it's a great question, but it's something that I get asked a lot when I'm talking to a corporation or an individual or a foundation trying to raise funds for SIMS. Is you get this sort of cocky, like, why do I want to help those musicians? Like, they chose this life. Why should I care? Kind of thing. And I always ask them. And the very first time I did it was with a room full of like middle-aged white men. And you could tell none of them cared about what I was saying. And like the CEO, or maybe it was the COO, said basically that, like, why should I care about these, drug using rabble rouser people in the music industry? And the first thing I said was, have you ever had your heart broken? And the whole room was like, I don't understand where this is going. It was like this very uncomfortable feeling. And they just looked at me and I'm like, I'm asking a question. Have you ever had your heart broken? And the guy I was looking at was like, well, of course. And I said, and when you were younger, or maybe even now, didn't you have a song when your heart was broken that you listened to over and over and over and over again? Well, yeah. Why wouldn't you want to help take care of the person who did that for you, who got you through your heartbreak? And then I always tell people, like, we use music to mourn, to celebrate, to relax, to make love to, but we don't want to support these people who are creating this art. Like, to me, it just makes perfect sense.
Well,
Like, can you imagine a world without music?
Yeah, and most of that art is created, as a way to self-medicate for the artist, and to sort of deal with their own,
Right.
most art does not come from a place of positivity. You know what I mean? And if
It's
it
a
is, that's not the stuff I
mechanism.
listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it is a self-medication, and so there are, that's also like a whole prescription that's run out for a lot of people. I joke around. I joked around with a friend earlier at lunch today, where I'm like, I feel like we're in an industry where you turned around and now everyone I know is like either dead, canceled, selling real estate, or day trading on their phones. Like, this is like, this is like, those are your four options, and everyone's kind of turned to these weird extremes or gotten into these horrible situations, and it's depressing, and it's already a community of people that suffers all the time. But now I think there's so little going on that when it happens, you really see it vibrating and echoing off the walls of your community,
Yeah. There's no way to hide that anymore, because there's not all this other noise and stuff happening, keeping people's pain hidden. And that's honestly why there needs to be a SIMS in every city, right? Is like, we know that we've been working with the music industry for 26 years.
Yeah.
We've seen it at its highs and lows, and you're absolutely right. Now that everything has stopped, and this isn't just for the music community, it's for the world. Like, everybody had to stop, and suddenly you're faced with your own inner demons, whatever those are, because you got nowhere to go to kind of get your mind off of it. You're just stuck there and just replaying this stuff. And we literally, from a mental health perspective, this is a massive crisis. The thing that we have to understand is this was a unified trauma that we've all gone through. And we're all walking out with lots of issues at the end of this. We're going to be anxious in ways we never were. We might be depressed when we weren't. And we're seeing it in therapist's office. Everybody's caseloads are overflowing. I mean, no joke, like literally people working themselves to death trying to take care of everybody else because everybody's coming to a therapist saying, I've never felt X, Y, or Z before. So I've said this to a lot of other therapists, it would be a very interesting research project if we weren't all living it, because it's fascinating to watch the similarities and the differences and what's coming up and what's being repressed. It's just been interesting, like I said, but we're all living it. So therefore it's lost its luster.
Yeah.
It's really hard to define a once in a lifetime huge event like this.
Yes,
and,
for sure.
And we're all living it. So there's no,
I think we should all be knocking on wood at the once in a lifetime part of the comment right
Yeah,
now.
that's
Yeah,
definitely-
anything wood anywhere near you,
Please.
start knocking on it
Please.
because
this is
Yeah,
true.
Paul
I'm
was in
not old enough
Texas
to make that
for-
kind of statement anymore.
I
Yeah.
could not have said that. Scratch. I'm going to cut that.
Yeah.
We're going to edit that out.
You just edit that part out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so Patsy, what are you recommending to people? Like, just in like, what is your best advice to anybody who might be struggling, to somebody who knows an artist or might be an artist? Where are you steering people now these days?
Well, what I say all the time, like I don't care whether you're in the music industry or you're a baker. If you need help and it's an emotional issue, call SIMS. We help so many people all over the country. Right now, we're only in Central Texas, but we talk to people. Well, now that I've been doing these meetings with people all over the world, literally from all over the world, they'll call us and email us with like, I need help. Can you get on the phone with me? So we'd offer that support to anyone in our community. Like, we just want everybody to know that there are resources out there, even if you don't qualify for SIMS, but it's easier for someone like us to help guide you than it is for you to try to Google that mess. I think the advice, though, just in general that I give even just friends of mine, like whatever thing that's happening to you and you're thinking that you're somehow different or weird or messed up, you're not. We're all in this traumatic, massive event that completely altered all of our lives. And we've had to adjust in ways that we would have never expected. And so whatever strange thought that you think you're having, just accept that it's not that strange. Probably everybody around you is having it. They just didn't have the courage to let you know that they're thinking it. And I think being as connected to people as you can in this situation, lots of times we'll get phone calls of I'm not friends with this person, but they're friends with somebody of mine on Facebook, and it looks like they're talking about killing themselves. Reach out to those people. If you're seeing strange comments, like don't Facebook message them back. If they're your friend, pick up the phone and say, dude, it looks like you're in trouble. How can I help? Because you're not going to just type that if you're not actually seeking some sort of support, like you're dumping it out there into the universe. So have the courage to call the people that you know and make sure that they're okay. All this disconnectedness is bad for humans, period. We need at least one other human in our life that we can turn to and dump all of our stuff on. So I think it's just, don't think you're absolutely crazy for whatever weird things are floating through your head. It's just part of it. And when you see somebody in trouble, pick up the phone and call them. Don't just send a text. Get them on the phone and make sure they're okay.
Jeff, me being somewhat involved in the music community and knowing a lot of artists, I've seen more than my fair share, and I'm sure yours is, more than tenfold of, too many people falling, to things and ways that, end up, taking their lives in one way or the other. Do you feel like that artists in the music community in Austin have a fairly good grasp of what SIMS is doing and are trying to support each other? Or?
I think that definitely there's an awareness of SIMS, obviously in the music community, at least in my group of friends and my peer group, which is, not exactly the freshest, newest peer group in town, but I assume it permeates through everyone. I think any artist is usually happy and encouraged by anything that's sort of advocating for them, and they're aware of it. I think maybe even during pandemic, it's hard to say because I have actually lost a few friends during all of this. But but also I think when you're a musician, you also tend to know a lot of people. You have a lot of casual friends, and your community is you feel this weird kinship with people that you don't even know that well, but you know, and so these things ripple and affect you pretty easily. I think maybe pandemic has made people a little bit braver about seeking help or admitting that they have problems. And so I think because we haven't seen each other face to face, it's easier for people to sort of admit that something's wrong. And especially because the whole world right now is going, it's okay, something's wrong, because it makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think people feel less weird about having problems and asking for help. And hopefully that flows over to people contacting SIMS if they need help or information or not.
Yeah, and I hope it's something that lasts, right? Because we all know that there's a massive stigma wrapped around having any kind of mental health issue. But I agree with you, Jeff. I think we've definitely had way more people call us for help than we've ever seen in the history of this organization. So we know that the pandemic is making it so people feel like it is okay to call, because everybody's not doing well, right? But I sure hope that when this is over, whatever the over is and whenever it happens, that people don't just go back to, now I go back to hiding my pain, right? Yeah. Just because the pandemic is over doesn't mean you no longer have a right to feel crappy and need some support. And so I just really hope that this event and people realizing that going to therapy or talking to somebody has absolutely helped them, that they're going to be willing to say, don't worry about that. Like, nobody cares about that. Just go. I went and it helped me. Like, the more people are open about seeking support, the more comfortable it is for the next guy to seek support. So I really hope that when it's over, we don't go back to just like business as usual, because that would be very sad.
I think that it should. I mean, I also feel that, like, as time goes by, our culture is changing, right? And so there's less, pride and machismo that goes along with all these different sections of life, and it's okay to actually be a little bit more fragile. It's a little okay to be, a little bit more forthcoming, with our feelings and our troubles and our, obviously being an artist and honestly, I'm in a bubble. I'm surrounded by mostly other like-minded creatives and stuff. That's sort of a wall I've sort of surrounded myself with. So, my friends are usually pretty good at that too. Yeah. So hopefully that's something that just keeps building and growing, and it makes it okay. You know what I mean? Like, I need help, so I ask for help.
People getting off of the bipolar coaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. It's its own thrill, though.
So Patsy, how can people support SIMS?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So you can go to simsfoundation.org/donate and donate to us. Certainly, it is a support of us if you're in the community and you have somebody that you're friends with in the music industry to recommend that they call us, no matter how minor their struggle might be. And just being on podcasts like this is really awesome. Like I shared before we started officially talking, we're committed to being in every music city in this nation so that anybody who's on tour will have a safe landing place if they're struggling. So that donation process would be really helpful. We just want to be sure that this industry is taken care of no matter where they are. So that's our entire goal. So yeah, donations will always be important.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Keep it up. We'll keep spreading the word as best that we can.
I appreciate it.
And thanks for joining us, Jeff. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to the next record. Hopefully my Jerusalem record.
Thank you, guys.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
There's a man on the road.